second hour begins now here at Ochelli.com and through other affiliate networks, including our pirate micro broadcasting friends up in the Northeast who are carrying us illegally on an FM band at the moment. I acknowledge you, but will not name you for legal reasons. Of course, if you're catching this further on down the stream via your fondle slab of choice, your applicable application, your podcatcher de jour, I do appreciate you as well. We are live here on a Monday and just going into the second hour. It is precisely 70 years after at least one of the dates I see recognized as the day that the nation state of Israel was established. And of course, this is the day in the news that we're dealing with this new embassy for the U.S. And now we've talked about temples and we've talked about walls and we've talked about the mount and the golden dome and all these things with Daniel Lewis Crumpton, who is the author of Then Came the Flood, which is a book available on Amazon, other places, whatever. But you can also go to downloadedcontent.com, check out his work, none of which is being discussed tonight, really, or maybe it is. We should leave that as an open question. And he's been extremely helpful for getting me to understand what's happening regarding this evangelical / born again / Baptist / man, I just don't get it. Why the strongest of Christians are in support of a lot of the things I'm seeing unfold, including not so Christian leader who got Christian support named Donald Trump and his campaign promise fulfilled now, putting this embassy in Jerusalem, pretty much telling the Palestinians, hey, here's my middle finger, and you know what that means. The Palestinians stepping away from the peace process and the clashes in Gaza, which have now led to dozens of fatalities and well over, looks like 1,800 injuries minimally for individuals that wish to protest and are being, well, as per usual, struck by the weapons that are wielded by the nation state of Israel. And casualty counts range from 60 to 90, according to the news feeds I'm seeing. But anyway, all of that seems to be rather, again, as I said earlier, quite pagan, but not the brand of paganism that I'm accustomed to, but one I am aware of, where a blood sacrifice would be necessary in order to consecrate ground. And they did use words like consecrate and things like that, or at least John Hagee did in the clip we played earlier. But Daniel, to continue the conversation, my friend, why is the U.S. Embassy, I mean, the U.S. Embassy is not a church. I mean, although we had pastors in there making statements, benedictions, prayers, whether it's Jeffress or it's Hagee, about what a shining, wonderful moment this is and how the United States is blessed because Donald Trump is blessed and they've done the right thing. And why would a U.S. Embassy play a role in the end times equation that we've been mapping out for an hour now?
Most of your evangelicals are conditioned to believe that the entire purpose of the establishment of the United States of America was to fulfill the prophecy of Israel becoming a nation. Okay? That is what we were taught. It's what a lot of them are taught, is that the only reason that America is here is to have established Israel and to protect Israel. And that's what they're taught. Okay? When you were talking earlier about America not being in biblical prophecy, no, obviously it doesn't mention America outright, but they really grasp at a lot of straws in pointing out references to the wings of an eagle, protecting the nation state of Israel. But honestly, I mean, what a lot of these churches are teaching their congregations is, in my opinion, treasonous.
Okay, hold on. Let me push back against one thing. When they're grasping at that eagle straw, Daniel, how many people have utilized that and how many different conquerors have actually utilized that as part of their standard? I do recall that Alexander the Great utilized an eagle as part of his standard when he was conquering part of the known world. And I'm aware that there were many people in biblical times who utilized animal symbols as part of their standards. I mean, an eagle is a common war-like symbol, when used again as part of a standard, a coded language for those that, really couldn't read. a recognizable symbol, an eagle or an eagle-like creature, often represented in various, there's deities that control eagles or turn into eagles in other religious faiths. The eagle could be a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, Columbia here, where America, or the seat of power that is in the District of Semiramis. It could be a lot of things, and I find that kind of fascinating that, well, it must be, because it could easily be the Third Reich as well, which is one of the things that Hagee got himself in trouble for, but let's not talk about that.
Right.
Go right ahead, though, Dan.
Yeah, but I mean that's where a lot of your support from American churches comes from. Is they're taught that America really is kind of a disposable nation that was really just used to help bring about the establishment of the nation state of Israel. And that's, I mean, so the significance of an American embassy, look, me and you have had several discussions about this off air, and I don't want to talk about Trump. I don't like like I said before, I think that it's all just a script. And there is one of the reasons that I don't want to talk about Trump is because there is a funny meme, about the Trumpents, and yeah, that's funny, but I also think that that's them laughing in your face, that it is so scripted, and that it really isn't. You don't choose who your, quote, elected officials are. It is a part of a script. And the fact that a cartoon character, a game show host, was put there, at this point in time, and that this is going on with the embassy in Jerusalem, really, I think that the whole Trump and Pence thing really is. Me and you both know black magic. We know about black magic. I don't participate in black magic, and neither do you. But we know that a part of magic is that you have to tell the people what you're doing, right? And I don't think that it is insignificant that Trump and Pence is the ones who are in office right now. I think that is very significant. Yeah, it's funny, but it's so funny, it's not funny. And because this is really a part of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, it's cool for me to take my Baptist hat off, right?
Well, take your Baptist hat off and let us begin to now decode what's happening. Okay. And while we do that, I will say that we'll have the phone lines open here. I didn't take the past couple of attempts at a call, and I just want to let you guys know that I will begin to take those. Just patiently wait. There is no screener. 252-301-2255, and I will bring you into the discussion. And in fact, I've got a caller right now. You want me to take him?
Sure.
All right. Well, right on the air is where you'll go, and you are joined into the conversation. The only thing is you cannot call with a blocked number. I just want people to keep that in mind. Let's see. Okay, so we have the 870 area code. You're on the air with Daniel Lewis Crumpton and Chuck Ochelli.
Gee, I feel special to be amongst the best.
Well, I do recognize this voice. Daniel, do you recognize this voice?
Yeah, he's one of the Avengers, man. That's Landry.
I have absolutely been engrossed in this conversation. I absolutely love the information. Chuck, I love the inquiries. Daniel, I love the information you're putting out. I'd like to add something into the conversation, and then I'm going to duck out because I don't want to be here doing the conversation. I really want to listen to what you guys have to say. But Daniel, there's something both you and I know, and Chuck, I think you probably got a real good idea of this as well. There are two huge control factors that have been a part of society since the birth of society on this planet. One of them is fear. It is the most effective control factor to control man's mind ever utilized by mankind. But there's one that's every bit as effective because its main emphasis is on fear. And you have pointed this out many times so far tonight, Daniel, and that's religion. That is organized religion. And what we see every time something like what's happening right now in Israel is we see a spike in fear across the entire planet. And with that, I'm just going to go away and listen to what you guys have to say. And thank you so much for covering this topic. Not enough people have the balls to do so.
Well, thank you. Roger Landry, of course, the man behind the Liberty Beacon, and I'm being told in my chat room that I need to have you on more often, Roger. And not just because of that. Listen, I do what I want with my show for sure, but you and I just talked a few days ago about you being on more often, and that's going to happen, guys. So just so
you're going to
know.
be coming. You're going to be on TV more often too. Everybody gets to see just how pretty you are, Chuck.
Okay, well, enough with the joke.
While we have Landry here, let me ask you a question, Roger.
Okay.
Sure.
The idea, the notion that America is a disposable nation that is simply here for the wills and the whims of the nation state of Israel, would you consider that treasonous?
I would absolutely consider it treasonous, but I see it as much as you. As a matter of fact, I was born and raised in the Catholic religion, the whole 9 yards, catechism, the whole 9 yards. My dad's best friend was a priest. Yes, I do see that. I do honestly see that, and I do honestly hear Christians stating over and over again what you just said. Maybe not in the exact words, but the principle's the same.
Yeah, sure.
That we are, in fact, here to ensure the survivability of...
And I'll tell you what, Roger, stick around for just a second, especially when we're talking about the politics of it. You know, everybody knows I'm a Ron Paul guy and all that, and I inserted myself into the political structure here in Georgia through the Republican Party. And I could tell you, if you even think of running for any particular office, even if it's like the chairman of the janitorial or public works, the first question that they ask you in the Bible Belt is, what do you believe about the nation of Israel? And if you take a stance like our founding fathers did, that we should be non-interventionalists, that we should trade with the world, but we should have no entangling alliances, you have absolutely no shot of being in the Republican Party long. Now, is that something that you can kind of buttress?
I would tell you at this point that the absolute power, okay? And this is something else that you really haven't, and I'm sure this is a topic for another day, and that is the difference, and there is a difference between Zionism and Judaism,
Yes.
Okay? But if you take into account the most powerful lobbies in this country today, there's two. The two most powerful lobbies in this country today are not, everybody thinks it's the military-industrial complex. Bull crap. It is, number one, is the pharmaceutical industry, which spends almost 500% more than their closest rival, which is the military-industrial complex. But if you take a non-manufacturing, a non-corporate entity, what's the most powerful lobby in this country, Chuck?
Well,
would it be AIPAC?
I was just going to spell it out, but yeah, that would be AIPAC. And how do we know that? Because, hey, you know, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders, what do they all have in common? They all had to, before going out and actually finishing the race, appear in front of AIPAC to assure them that all of them would be right on board.
How many presidents since the birth of Israel 70 years ago, okay? And there have been a couple, okay, but not in recent years, have not paid a trip to the Wailing Wall to be seen there, to have pictures spread everywhere. How many have not gone to Jerusalem and paid their respect? How many? Okay? If you are not going to be on board in some aspect, all right, with the Jewish lobby, AIPAC, in this country, or with the support of Israel, you have just knocked 50% of your chance of ever being elected right out the frickin' window in a heartbeat. At least 50%.
I somehow think Truman didn't go.
No, he didn't.
And I think there was one other, and I can't think of who it was.
And I can't either. I was kind of hoping you'd fill the blank, but I don't lie. So
no, but literally, I mean, I know Truman didn't go, but there was one other. And the only reason why Truman didn't go is because he didn't have to run after that, I think.
Yeah. It's what you guys are discussing right now on this show, and unless you have something you specifically would like to ask me, Daniel, I really would like to bow out. I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and I really want to listen to the rest of this conversation now that I've thrown a little bit of gas on the fire.
All right.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, Roger Landry.
Now you have my permission to leave.
There we go.
Y'all have a great night, and I will be listening.
Absolutely.
Later,
Thank
Roger.
you, Roger. And
All right.
we will be speaking with you soon. Roger Landry, again, from thelibertybeacon.com. Of course, that's a wider organization. And again, I will have Roger on very soon. But he does bring up some interesting points here that we certainly are going to get to. And I'm also going to leave it open for the idea that we may have to go into overtime. We've got another caller coming in. Daniel, you want to take it?
Sure.
All right. So, let's see. Oh, I attempted to bring it in.
Yep. Here I am.
Vince.
Hey, Daniel. Good to talk to you.
Hey, Vince. It's been a long time, man.
It has been a real long time.
I'm bringing out the strangest critters, aren't I?
Yeah. Hey, and first off, I love your book. That's and I told you this before, that I'd waited for that book to be written for a very long time. And then came the flood. It is incredible. The concept, the idea, the ideology is just incredible. And good to hear you, Roger. Haven't listened to you in some time, but I've been, of course, busy with my own things. But to the subject of Jerusalem, and I probably stand a whole lot closer to where you are, Daniel, than the what you call the fundamental Christians. We can look at this, where this came from back into the 1800s, and it was a setup, the setup for the takedown.
Yeah, I want to get into that too. But, man, Vince, I really appreciate that. And pretty soon I am going to be putting out a follow-up to that one, which I think you're really, really going to dig. And it has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight too. But you were just about to get into it. Before you do, Vince, and I already know where you're going, when you said the 1880s, I already knew exactly what you were about to hit on, and I want you to hit on it. But I want to express something to everybody who is listening. The interpretations that fundamentalist Christians have about the nation-state of Israel should not be a reflection on the 66 books called the Bible at all. Because whenever in the first hour when I was talking as a Baptist, I was telling you what their slant or interpretation of the Scriptures are. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what the Scriptures say. And if I'm correct, what Vince is about to hit on with the 1880s and something being a setup will kind of let people know. So go ahead.
Well, before he does, I just want to wait 1 second. I want to add one thing in here, and that is that as we discuss this, let's understand that it is not merely about the historical significance or the way that people have decided to interpret it. You clearly did quote some scripture in the first hour, and when you were quoting it, you were quoting scripture. Now, as for how that has been interpreted, this is the thing that you were describing.
Right.
From that point of view, as best you can, because that's no longer your personal point of view.
Well,
but at one time,
let me say this real quick, Chuck.
Yeah.
Look, anybody can take two scriptures and make anything out of it. Like Judas went out and hung himself. Go ye therefore and do likewise. Right? It's important to look at the scriptures in context, but anybody can take two scriptures and make any teaching at all.
Well, that's correct. And one quick question for Vince before he describes what he's going to describe. Vince, you said, I stand closer to where Daniel is than, say, a fundamentalist Christian. Just so for contextual value here, would you consider yourself a Christian, Vince? I don't think I've ever asked you that question.
I hate to use the word because of the context that it brings into the fundamental ideology that has, again, it is a setup for the takedown. We go back, but I will call myself a Christian otherwise, but I have to quantify that.
Okay,
Well,
I just wanted to place what you're about to say in context with, whether it is something that goes right along with what your belief system may or may not be,
I think a
or it
better,
is something that you're going to describe objectively.
I think, I
I
think,
just wanted to go into it that way. Yeah.
I think a better way to ask the question, Chuck, is if a person believes that the scriptures are inspired. That's a better
Ah,
way.
okay. Well, how about that, Vince?
Yeah, but I don't think everything's there. It's it's like an onion, and one understanding leads to another understanding. I would think I would go back to what Christians were called in the a couple of thousand years ago, and following followers of the way, and so that's what I would maybe perhaps describe my religiosity in.
Well, fair enough. So go ahead and make that point that Daniel set up for you.
Yes. Well, empire building has been going on for centuries. Conspiracy is fact, and we see that, and it's proven. So of course there are theories involved in that go along with conspiracy of people's notions trying to figure it out. That conspiracy is fact. As far as the Bushes and the American empire, that goes back into the Opium Wars, and fast forward to the World War II, Nazi Germany, the Jews that are called Jews, the Khazars, the Jews left black and came back white. So with the Balfour Agreement, the very slow progression. There's no hurry for this plan of world domination. They're moving it along incrementally. And I say, Nazi Germany, they didn't lose the war. We just brought them over here and incorporated them into the American ideology that, the OSS became the CIA. So we go back and look in the movement. There's a great book called The Hajj. I forget the author, but talking about, in the early 1900s and these Jews coming over to Palestine, setting up the kibbutz, I think is the word, the farms, and they just slowly and incrementally took over and built their power base, and then decreed the Palestinian a non-resident or non-occupant of the lands in 1948. The fundamental Christian will say this is where the scripture that when the fig tree blossoms and begins to put forth fruit. So it's all like Daniel was saying, you take these scriptures and you work it into your own context, and this is what we have. Back to the 1800s, the idea that Israel was to become this nation that or the state that happened in 1948. It was all to set up to build this empire. And they put this in the minds through the pulpit into the congregation, and accepting the idea that these Khazars, they call themselves Jews, and they were part of the ones, destroying the less, the ones that the actual Jews, and even other Khazars. They were part of the extermination in Germany, and there were people like Soros, that was Judas himself, and so. And I assume that Hitler himself was part Jewish and a descendant of Rothschild, illegitimately. It's all just being brought to the point, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. So they put the situation and, what is it, problem, action, reaction, solution, and that's what we're looking for. We've been in World War III for quite a while, but it's really going to get kicked off, and then. So when the fundamental Christians say, see, when China and Russia, Gog and Magog, it's called, or they call them, everybody's going to be converging on the Middle East, and who knows, this Project Blue Beam will be set up, and this idea that the rapture occurs. But if you go back into ancient scriptures in the book of Daniel, if you're a follower of Christ, then you'll see that this prophecy that the 69 weeks, the 70 weeks it came to an end. Well, the 69th week ended, and Christ came into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. That was the 70th week. So midway through, he's cut off, right? He's crucified, and then at the stoning of Stephen, that was the 70th week. So a week is 7 years in prophetic, according to the prophetic timeline. So the Jews, had their chance, and then they failed, and then the power goes on to the church, or those that follow the way. But then it becomes convoluted, and people wrestle the scriptures to their own end, demise, and that's what it's setting up. So we get to the Project Bluebeam, and I think that the whole world's going to see this false Christ come, and then who knows, all the technology that we have no idea what's going on. But I think it'll be some type of this supposedly the 70th week is moved to the end of time, and then the rapture occurs, whether it be before or after. So I don't buy into all that. I think it's all lies and set up for ultimately the counterfeit, which I think is the devil, and I think there are principalities and powers in the skies, in the spiritual realm, and what's the claim? That God is evil, and that's what the devil, he wants. Hey, I'm the good guy, So people are being deceived, and obviously Israel is an evil empire. South Africa apartheid was not put up with the rest of the world, but Christians say, and I use that word loosely, I'll just go say the fundamental Christians say, we'll support Israel and allow them these atrocities, killing children, and if all you got is a bucket of rocks, are you not going to fight back? So that's the long and the short of it.
Vince, one thing though that you said there that I will argue with is apartheid was put up with for quite some time. That wasn't something that was instituted for a couple of years and then was snuffed out quickly. And there are various levels where genocides and the man's inhumanity to man is self-evident if you examine the situation on the ground. The treatment of the Kurds, for instance, throughout the Middle East by various regimes, is something that is of interest if you pay attention to it. So I mean, there's a precedent here for the oppression of a people, for the largest open air concentration camp in the world, which is in Palestine. The fact that
I disagree. It's in America.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Well, it may not be as bad, but we're a bigger open air prison. And don't forget the Armenians and the Turks that the genocide of the Armenians, which were probably closer to true Christianity than anybody else. They even styled their alphabet to be artistic and to be able to express that ideology of Christianity.
The Armenian genocide. Yeah, the Armenian genocide is a good thing to bring up as well. What I'm saying is, and we could take a look at the blood-soaked land that we occupy currently as allegedly Americans, and we could talk about that too. But this is a recurring theme. It's just that I've never seen a full-on, biblical prophecy applied to America becoming. I mean, there were prophets at the time, individuals who called themselves prophets who believed that it was the destiny and it was in the scriptures that this country be established. And there are individuals that still believe in that today, and that prosperity is also something that can be shown. I mean, the Calvinist aspect of Christianity, exemplifies this idea that you're predestined to succeed based on the, being ordained by the Lord to do so and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that go on like this, but none of them, to my recollection, are so closely tied to the end of days, the book of Revelations, and all of that. So I think, Daniel...
No F's on Revelation. Sorry, I had to do that to you.
No problem. But Daniel, all the things that Vince brought up, how would you address that?
I think the important question is, because me personally, I believe that the 66 books of the King James Bible is inspired. Okay, I don't limit the inspiration of scriptures to the 66 books. but I do believe that what's in the 66 books is inspired. All right. So that being said, I don't think that we're supposed to be supporting genocide. I don't care who's doing it. And anybody who knows anything about what's going on with Palestine and the nation of Israel knows that there is a genocide that's taking place. And my God doesn't condone that. You know, one of the things that got me out of the Baptist church was when the war in the Middle East really ramped up after 9/11. And the internet YouTube was becoming a thing, and I'm hearing about the Prince of Peace, or I'm reading about the Prince of Peace, and, you know, love thy neighbor and pray for them that do evil towards you and things like that. And then I'm watching videos on YouTube of Palestinian children getting their faces blown off or their limbs blown off. And I'm hearing from the pulpit that all of those people are born demon-possessed anyway, and that this is the will of God, and that those little babies in Palestine are somehow or another a threat to the nation state of Israel. And it didn't make any sense, man. It really didn't make any sense at all. And I had to say, where exactly is this entire idea of a 7-year tribulation and the rapture and dispensationalism and all this stuff coming from? And when I looked around Baptist churches specifically, there's something that I saw in the most pulpits, and it was the King James Bible with C.I. Scofield's reference notes. And if you really want to understand where this Israel worship came from in the Christian or evangelical church, you have to ask the question, who is C.I. Scofield? Okay. Who funded C.I. Scofield's reference Bible? And that's when you start picking at a very large, nasty scab. So, you know, I thought that's what you were going to hit on. But people who don't know who C.I. Scofield is, he was a failed lawyer. He was a drunkard, which, you know, look, I'm a recovered alcoholic, so no fault there. But he was, according to biblical principles, he was not qualified to become a pastor. He was divorced, and you can't be a pastor if you're divorced. But shortly after a divorce, he joined something called the Lotus Society, which was kind of like a secret society. And then all of a sudden, he was heavily funded by Oxford to edit the C.I. Scofield Reference Bible. And they almost, like the minute that you get out of the baptismal pool in Baptist churches, they give you a cool Bible with your name printed on it, and it has C.I. Scofield's reference notes. So the idea of dispensationalism isn't really coming from the text of the Bible. It's coming from reference notes from the Scofield Reference Bible. And that's really when it really started to sweep the evangelical church. And it was in 1883.
I'm sorry I didn't reference that, but that is exactly right. That is part of that setup for the takedown. Absolutely.
Right. So I guess the questions that people need to ask is, who is the Lotus Society, and why was C.I. Scofield heavily funded to put together reference notes throughout the entire Bible that promoted for the first time the idea that the nation of Israel must be established and all these sorts of things, you know, all of a sudden? Well, I think Roger said and made a really good point that what people need to understand is there is certainly a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Totally different. Totally different.
Well, Vince, I think that you have definitely inspired part of the conversation. I'm going to let you go, though, just in case somebody else wants to join in, if you don't mind.
And before I go, let me add real quick, Hal Anthony, Behind the Woodshed, this past Sunday, you can do a search, BTWRLM 266. And towards the end of the second hour, Hal has spoken some pretty good stuff about this right here. And he's been covering this issue of Israel, the Israeli, and how the difference in the difference between the Judaism and the different tribes, and also the father of lies and his children, which is these people here, these fake Jews, these Khazars. So, Daniel, very nice to talk to you again. Man, you're never far from my heart. I love you, brother. And all of our mutual friend here, Jason Patrick, when in 2014 in Beckerville, and he told me, he says, "Man, you remind me of a good friend of mine, Daniel Lewis Crumpton." And so I tracked you down, and we became friends. And I love you, man.
Love you too.
Chuck, of course, you already know. I love you too, brother.
All right, Vince. Well, you know what? We love and appreciate you. And actually, we got to get you back on the show sometime soon to talk about some of the things that you've been digging into lately that don't have to do with tonight's topic, but we need to get you back on. Last time we had you on was with Mama Bear and all that.
Yes.
And I want to revisit a couple of things with you too. But thanks for adding in tonight. And
one more plug before I go. This Friday I have Mike Stickler on. Ponder Gander on reallibertymedia.com. That's at noon Central Time, and it's rather fitting that this will be my last broadcast on the road, and I'll be home the following week, back home in Arkansas after 16 months of travel, and been covering the Bundy topic extensively, and so if you guys would like to come on along and listen over at reallibertymedia.com, rlmradio.xyz. And thanks for the plug. And thanks, guys. I'm out of here, and I'll get back into chat over there as quick as I can be. Thanks again.
All right. Take care, Vince. Of course, reallibertymedia.com carries this show via the Ochelli channel. And, yeah, sure, go over to Real Liberty Media and check out what's over there. Vince is completely involved. But anyway, you know, the topics that he brings up related to tonight's discussion, and yeah, we're definitely going into overtime because we're already 3/4 of the way through this hour, Daniel, and we've just begun to touch upon the topic that I know a lot of people want to hear about related to this because, well, what about Zionism? And there are individuals who, you know, they're not Jews and they say they are Zionists, and there are individuals who are Jews and say they are also Zionists. And what is Zionism outside of the reference that we just, you know, touched upon in the first hour briefly? What does that actually mean in context with what it is we're talking about and current events?
Go to, do a Google search on Theodore Herzl, and that's where you really want to start your search on Zionism. Honestly, because Zionism and Judaism are two different things. For one thing, Judaism isn't practiced today. It can't be. Without a temple, without temple sacrifices, and without the temple ornaments, the Ark of the Covenant, and things like that, you literally can't practice Judaism at all. So who's practicing Judaism today? No temple, no sacrifices, no Ark of the Covenant on Temple Mount. You can't practice Judaism. So that needs to really be understood. So we're not dealing with Judaism. We're dealing with something completely different. Okay, now if this is what's strange to me is with New Testament Christians who believe in Jesus Christ and all that, you know, it's really important to ask, what does the New Testament actually, like, what are the descriptions of who is a Jew and who is not a Jew? All right? Now, it boggles my mind how you have in churches across this country where they say that those people are God's chosen people, and then they reference Genesis where it talks about Abraham, right? But wait a second, Chuck. Do you remember when I read that scripture in the first hour?
I sure do.
Okay, who was the covenant made with?
Well, it was made with Abraham.
That's exactly right, with Abraham. So where does the nation of Israel come into that covenant where it's talking about, I will bless thee that bless you and curse them that curse you? Is it talking about the nation of Israel? Or is it talking about the guy that this God made a covenant with, Abraham?
Well, what about the argument, and obviously we're going to have to go into the next hour with this, but what about the argument that under what is considered to be Judaism today, there are individuals who are under particular banners? There are Levites, for instance, literally the order of Judaism named after, or the individuals in Judaism that are named after Levi, who was one of Abraham's children, right? And there are others under the very same types. Like, in other words, there's lots of different kinds of Jews according to their order, right? And there are cantors, and there are all these different levels and things where you're supposed to be adherent to and therefore part of, say, that nation. which, out of him is going to come these nations and that nation, which becomes Israel, and all of them together collectively are Israel. That seems to be the logic, unless I'm mistaken here.
Yeah, I mean, in order for Judaism to be practiced, you have to know what your genealogy is with the 12 tribes of Israel, and that's impossible. Now, the records were destroyed in 70 AD, and nobody knows what tribe they're actually from, so how can you know which is supposed to be the priest class and the royal? You can't know. Okay, and they talk about, well, if you do DNA testing and you go back, dude, look at your family tree. This whole world has become a melting pot. There's no pure anything. Okay, but the New Testament, and this is what's also weird, is one, my God is not a eugenicist. He doesn't have a chosen people that are of a DNA strand. And if you go to Titus chapter 3, it says, avoid foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain. So how are New Testament Christians putting emphasis on genealogies when their New Testament says avoid it? And I think just the actual true God, the all, has a sense of humor and made sure that the tribes of Israel, quote unquote, if you believe in a historical Old Testament and all that good stuff, that there is no way that you could figure out what tribe you're from. I think that's just his way of going, see, it's silly. It's silly to sit there and try to trace your genes back to this Old Testament history.
Well, let me break right into what you're saying, because I want to crush your entire argument with one shot.
Sure.
So allow me to do so, or to attempt to. Because, this sounds very interesting, and okay, how is it you can trace any of this stuff back, and how do you know you're related to anybody? I mean, you only know who your father was because your mama told you so, all that kind of good stuff. All right. Let me throw a serious monkey wrench into this, and I want you to answer this with the next few minutes. We will continue to take calls, and we'll continue into the next hour, and it'll be beyond the normal 2 hour. I think what we'll do actually is put this out in two forms, and I'm going to put them both out there and not put this just behind the paywall, because I think this whole discussion needs to be heard. Here is my major question, in 252-301-2255. I'd like you guys to hold off until we go to break and come back. But 252-301-2255 is the number to call in. If you're on my Skype list, obviously, I'll add you in as well. But here is the biggest question. I recall that, in the Bibles that I was presented with when I was a kid, I was baptized as a Methodist, all right, because my father did not want to be part of the Catholic Church and so on, and neither did my mother. They rejected the teachings of the Catholic Church. No need to get into the particulars on it, but the bottom line here is that I was presented with the Bible as a child, which had the words of Christ in red. Okay. Well, I recall from that, and also from a discussion with you a few years ago, where we talked about the covenants. And notice I said plural, covenants. Why did I say that? Okay, because at some point, according to the word of the Lord, because I'll just use the common vernacular here, Jesus is the Father, the Son, he is all, right? He is part of this. So his word is the word of God, effectively, right? This is my vague understanding as a child. Well, again, you brought it back to me when we had a discussion a little while back, a couple of years back. It seems to me as though Christ says in the scripture that all of those covenants and things that came before me don't count anymore, basically. I know I'm paraphrasing, folks. I'm sorry, I'm not going to quote the scripture, but they don't count anymore because I am literally the covenant. Now, if I'm a Christian, theoretically, objectively speaking here, if I'm a Christian and I believe that, the Trinity, if you will, are represented here, that all things, and the word of Christ is sacred and is law, effectively, then why does the earlier covenants, which chronologically would have occurred before Christ's arrival, obviously, If I'm a Christian, why am I concerned with these past arrangements with God?
That's a good question. I mean, I believe that it's really cool to know the Old Testament and to understand the setup or the prologue for the coming of Yeshua. But you ask a really, really good question. And I think it's a question that, it's funny because I had some close family members who left the Baptist Church and joined Messianic Judaism, which, wow, that's great. Messianic Judaism. We're Jews for Jesus. We believe in Jesus, but we also think that you better obey all the Old Testament the rules and laws, which is impossible. I mean, you can't do that, but you got to do that. So it's like, what the hell? So it's a good question. What does the Old Covenant have to do with the New Covenant? And there are some deeper questions. Like, for example, was the God that Jesus was preaching the actual deity from the Old Testament? And I don't want to kind of go there yet because I want to stick to orthodoxy as much as I can for right now, but that's a good question.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes here, but I wanted to just lodge that question and say, look, here is an interesting thought, and I like that you mentioned that to follow all of the laws as laid out in the Old Testament is an impossibility. I mean, and it comes down to a lot of minutia, by the way. If you're not aware of it, I mean, you can't mix certain clothing together.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of dietary concerns here. There's various things that are just simply impossible to adhere to, because it's just immense.
Yeah.
But it's so strange to me. And also, you bring up the Jews for Jesus thing. This has been a confusion again since I'm a child, and I first heard of this, and I went, well, wait a minute. I thought in order to be a Jew, kind of means Jesus is not part of your equation. If you believe that what came after is really counterfeit or not actually part of this belief system, like I always found it odd that if you believe in only the Old Testament and you stay there, well, you could just say, well, what came after is just, a misunderstanding. Or, he's an interesting teacher, but he's not really the guy we were waiting for.
Right.
Okay, I get that. But I don't get, well, he is the guy we were waiting for, but I'm actually a Jew. I don't understand. It's very circular in its logic to me, and I guess it is merely my ignorance that doesn't allow me to understand this.
Mm-hmm. I think you should go to break.
Oh, look at that!
I think you should because I mean, look. The best question to ask is what is the New Testament definition for all these evangelicals that are in support of the nation state of Israel? What is the New Testament definition of a Jew? And the answer is there, and I want to give that answer, but you probably need to take a break.
Well, you know what? That is exactly what I'm going to do. So stick around, and yes, we will let you join into the conversation as we go into hour number 3 of the Ochelli Effect. Daniel Lewis Crumpton is with me. We're certainly talking about current events, but we're also kind of giving you a bit of a biblical lesson. And it's rather interesting to me, although it is extremely disturbing. So, Daniel, we want them to call in 252-301-2255 if they have anything else to add, and stick around, especially if you're on the live stream. We'll be right back.